My name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com. I know that tapping by ourselves can be difficult sometimes. That's why it can be useful to tap with a practitioner. But that being said, today I want to share 10 tips to increase the effectiveness of tapping by ourselves. So tip number 1, make sure to stay hydrated. That means to drink maybe 1 or 2 glasses of water before or during your tapping session, because being dehydrated can sometimes hinder the effectiveness of EFT. Tip number 2, be specific. The more specific that you are, the higher the chances that you will notice progress and that you will also be able to detect what is known in EFT as shifting aspects. What do I mean by that? Shifting aspects are when one aspect's intensity diminishes and then another one comes to the forefront, often leading to different emotions or sensations. For example, let's say that I'm tapping on the specific event of a recent argument that I had with my girlfriend. So initially, I might be focusing on the aspect of the look on her face as we were arguing. And when I think about that now, it makes me feel sadness and an uncomfortable sensation in my chest. And so that's what I'm focusing on in the first round of tapping. But then after 1 or 2 rounds of tapping, when I stop to reassess how I'm feeling now about this event I'm tapping on, I might notice that I no longer feel sad, but now I'm feeling angry. And I'm no longer focusing so much on the aspect of the look on her face as we were arguing, but now my mind is focusing more on a certain phrase that she said to me during that argument. And the sensation, the uncomfortable sensation, is no longer in my chest, maybe now is in my throat. So tip number 3, when it comes to shifting aspects, sometimes the new aspects that arise are within the same memory or situation that you are focusing on. Like in the example I just shared, I'm still focusing on the recent argument I had with my girlfriend, but instead of focusing on the look on her face, now it's more about a certain phrase that she said to me. But other times, the new aspect might entail a whole different memory. In that case, when tapping by ourselves, I recommend focusing on no more than 1 or maybe 2 different memories per tapping session. Otherwise, you might end up getting lost or feeling overwhelmed with all the different aspects at play. When tapping with a practitioner, though, it can be easier to follow the different threads as they come up during the session without getting lost. So tip number 4, if you find that the standard EFT phrase of "I deeply and completely accept myself" doesn't fully resonate with you, you can try more neutral phrases such as "this is what I'm noticing right now," which usually trigger less inner resistance or cognitive dissonance when we use them. Tip number 5, tap with mental images. If you are a somewhat visual person, tapping on a certain mental image connected to the issue you're trying to work on can usually be very useful. As you tap on that image every couple of rounds, stop to reassess if there's any difference in how you are feeling about the image or in the image itself, in how you are perceiving the image. Maybe the more you tap on it, you notice that the image becomes increasingly friendlier or safer. Tip number 6, sometimes it can be useful to focus more on our feelings and not so much on the words that we use, because tapping is usually most effective when we manage to be in our feelings space. And sometimes getting too hung up on the words that we use can make us intellectualize too much, and it makes us get into our heads too much. And so the tapping becomes less effective. Tip number 7, tune in to the sensations in your body. Personally, I don't find it very useful to get too hung up on the words to describe the sensation, but more to simply feel the sensation or notice or place some of my awareness on the physical sensation as I am focusing on a certain mental image, a certain memory, a certain situation, and to tap while I'm placing some of my awareness on the physical sensations that come up or that I notice in my body while I'm thinking about that. As we tap, we usually notice either a decrease in the unpleasant emotional charge that we are feeling somewhere in our bodies, or we might notice the emergence of new aspects to tap on, which is known as shifting aspects, like I explained before. Tip number 8, good is better than perfect. What do I mean by that? Yes, the ideal scenario is that we are able to be very thorough with our tapping and completely address every aspect within the memory or mental image or situation that we are addressing. And we only stop with our tapping session once we have done that. But sometimes we might not have enough time or capacity to do that. And so my advice is don't let perfectionism stop you dead in your tracks from doing any tapping at all. Sometimes tapping for only a few minutes on one or two aspects within a memory, a mental image, or a situation can still be helpful and can still be good enough for the time being. Tip number 9. In my personal experience, tapping while crying has been very effective. In those moments when I happen to be crying or when I happen to feel like crying, I simply tap through the points without any specific intention or agenda to make the crying or whatever emotion I'm feeling go away. I simply allow myself to think what I'm thinking and to feel what I'm feeling, and I'm simply tapping through the points as I do that. And what I've noticed is that it has allowed for deeper emotional release than when I simply cry without tapping, or when I simply tap without any words or specific focus and I'm not feeling anything in particular. If you'd like to know more about that, I have another 5-minute video where I walk you through that process. And lastly, tip number 10, as I usually say, if you ever feel overwhelmed or you encounter a memory that might be too emotionally intense or traumatic to work on by yourself, then in that case, I recommend enlisting the aid of a certified EFT practitioner with a mental health background, such as myself or someone else. Otherwise, feel free to give it a go. Maybe not all of these tips might work for you. What works for one person might not work for another person. We are all different. And it's about finding what works best for each of us. So I hope this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you again in one of my next videos.